Good evening. Are you hearing well my voice? Yes. Is there too much echo? Good. Thank you for the initiative of Dr. Jihad Hukayem for giving us this opportunity to rethink about the economy of Lebanon to 2025. I analyze the word rethinking because thinking and rethinking are two different things, like the primary market and the secondary market of stock exchange. The primary is thinking, but when you sell the stock in the stock exchange, it becomes rethinking, which is sale, marketing. That's for a short introduction. Doesn't work. Thank you. Well, Conference on Cyber Financial Crime Risk and the ICC, that is the International Chamber of Commerce. Early in the 90s, after the fall of communism, the major subject of conferences, of which one organized by the International Herald Tribune in June 1990, centered around the theme, the US and Europe, conflict, cooperation, or crisis. That is the security of safety and the safety of security. At present, financial crime risk is a very hot subject all over 5 continents. Sanctions, de-risking, OFAC, Patriot Act, FATF, FinCEN, FATCA, tax evasion, offshore centers, cyber threats, and penalty fees and punishments have become the newest jargons of the financial world. According to the report of IMF on the issue of financial system abuse and financial crime, there is no single broadly accepted understanding of the meaning of the term financial crime. In its narrowest sense, it refers to a non-violent crime resulting in a pecuniary loss which involves a financial institution or its clients as the victims. Hence, financial crime risk refers to fraud and corruption, tax evasion, money laundering, abuse of confidence and embezzlement, terrorist financing and weapons proliferation, cybercrime. Fraud and corruption. Who does not remember Enron, WorldCom, Madoff, or Germany's Enron, Leo Kirsch of Kirsch Group, or the Chinese Ezubao? An accounting satire for you to explain fraud and corruption. When we define the dollar value of a balance sheet, we say on the left side you have the total assets, and on the right side you have the equity and the liabilities. With fraud, nothing is right on the left side and nothing is left on the right side. Who commits financial crime? Organized criminals, including terrorist groups, corrupt heads of state and their subordinates, business leaders and senior executives, senior and junior employees, and many high-tech digital specialists. Taxation or tax evasion. If we look into Wikipedia.org, the latest list of countries by external debt classification, you may wonder why these 189 countries are excessively indebted. Indebtedness of states arises from various reasons, but most important of all, from income tax evasion. Why do you think about the Lebanese? What do you think about the Lebanese public debt to stand by 2025? Two major types of tax evasion, illegal and legal. In spite of the laws and courts, law enforcement authorities, punishments, penalties, and imprisonment, individuals, partners, companies dare to evade paying taxes. On the legal side, The multinational companies since the 60s and their offshore tax domiciliations by attorneys created on islands of this universe such as Bermuda, Nassau, Cayman Islands, Panama, Malta, Mauritius, all have been menus and venues for tax evasion. These places have been labeled tax havens, tax evasion centers. Isn't this a financial crime and abuse under the umbrella of circumvention of laws? Money laundering, a rather new phenomenon that has been recently developed in most societies and economies, is referred to as dirty money. Sums of money, mostly in cash, accumulated by individuals, organizations, and corporate entities by illegal acts such as bribery, drug money, tax evasion, hostage-taking, corrupt functionaries, insider dealings, terrorist financing, and other illegal activities. This dirty money is washed, as you know, at laundry machines and introduced into the banking system. But in the 80s and the 90s of the past century, we hardly heard about this phenomenon, although all the other sins mentioned above existed. Abuse of confidence, a financial abuse. Everyone understands what abuse of confidence means. It's part of the human character. There are, of course, exceptions. In the business and financial world, if you want to succeed, you have to be honest, reputed, and integral. The road of abusers' confidence is short. Sooner or later, they fall in the ditch. The cost of ignorance is much higher than the price you pay for learning knowledge or compliance to the rules, laws, and principles. Terrorist financing and weapons proliferation by organizations and states for various political objectives. For the concerned parties, it is a question of life and death and their regimes. For the West, they are considered war zones, and of course, in such situation, there will be weapons proliferation. But you know well which countries in the West and East manufacture and sell these weapons. Sometimes even they donate these weapons. This financial crime is highly related to political implications, and I shall limit my discourse to what I already described. Cybercrime and electronic crime. This is the greatest threat that banks and financial institutions face today, and no banking system is spared from this risk. It is the newest financial crime that hits banks, depositors, and investors. It targets employees to get access to insider information or internet correspondence. According to the American Banker magazine, people are the weakest link. Cybercriminals utilize social engineering to steal people's credentials, passport copies, bank account information, or any other digital information. If regulatory authorities and financial institutions and bank managements do not take action, this crime will pose huge problems in the functioning of economies and the structures of banking systems worldwide. This emerging threat for banks is that cybercrime is becoming even more sophisticated in taking money away from banks and customers, as reported by Richard Benham, professor at the UK National Cyber Skills Centre. Banks must increase their security before being attacked. They already have been attacked in many banking systems. In our banking system in Lebanon, are we ready to face this new crime in the coming 10 years? Al Jazeera reported on April 30 that cybercrime is the rise of the digital mafia. Cyber theft has long replaced the traditional concept of bank robberies. Recent international targets, including the US Federal Reserve Bank, the Central Bank of Philippines, Qatar National Bank Doha, Central Bank of Bangladesh, Central Bank of Cyprus, and Central Bank of Greece. In a recent annual survey on financial crime in the Middle East and North Africa, 2016, by a joint initiative between Thomson Reuters and Deloitte, here are the results to a few questions. Question number 6, which of the following financial crime programs does your organization currently have in place? Please select all that apply. If you see this table, you see that the cybercrime is the least importance by banks. Question number 18, using the scale below, please indicate how concerned are you with these financial crime issues? Well, the same thing applies to anti-money laundering, sanctions, fraud, bribery, corruption, counterterrorism, and cybercrime. We see that all these countries, banks in these countries, are extremely concerned, which is the light blue, then comes the very concerned, the dark blue, and so on. So there is ihtimam, as we say in Arabic, about this factor of cybercrime by banks. States, regulatory authorities, international organizations, and financial institutions are combating financial crimes by imposing the following solutions and tools: sanctions, laws, acts or bills such as the US OFAC and Patriot Act, FATF, FATCA, de-risking of correspondent banking relations, the Wolfsburg principles for KYC that correspondent banks have to adopt in interbank relationships, anti-money laundering 40 recommendations. Sanctions. These are laws established by various states, regulatory bodies, international organizations to combat financial crimes mentioned earlier. They include Western countries such as the US, the UN, the European Union, and OECD to put order on fiscal authorities, banking systems, and correspondent banks. At the same time, along with these measures, countries have established courts to fine, punish, and confine in prison for those who do not comply. But sanctions have limitations. When you overuse them, sanctions become double-edged sword. The recent declaration of the US Treasury Secretary Jacob J. Lew, as read in Carnegie Endowment's latest reports, is comforting when he raised the importance of guarding against sanctions misuse.
دكتور بولدوكيان، بس إذا فينا نختصر شوي بعد معنا بس دقيقتين، إذا ممكن نختصر شوي.
Tax evasion and tax avoidance. Since some time in recent months, the ministries of finance of the European Union, 28 countries, are introducing new directives for more fiscal transparency by multinational companies. By this action, the European Union is attempting to combat fiscal evasion of these giant companies. In a recent meeting of the OECD, officials have proposed to the ministers of finance of the G20 countries to create a forum to combat fiscal evasion of the multinationals. As stated earlier, this fraud has worsened, deteriorated the fiscal position of the EU member states to such a level that the four convergence principles of the Maastricht Treaty for the European currency, euro, was not respected during the past 10 years, which created huge economic, financial, and social problems to some of the member states. So far, so good for the financial crime. Now coming to the role of the International Chamber of Commerce and its various committees vis-à-vis the issue of financial crime risk and the various solutions and acts by states, regulatory authorities, and international organizations. Where does the ICC stand? An organization founded in 1933 following and monitoring the development of international business by introducing standards and uniformity in the business practice, such as the UCP 600. Most of these crime issues presented have significant negative economic consequences. In fact, these crimes undermine the integrity and the stability of the banking, fiscal, and financial systems worldwide, which in turn discourage investments and distort international capital flows, as well as international trade and trade finance in developing, emerging, and advanced economies. As defined by the ICC, trade finance has been an area of growing attention in the past few years. Financial Action Task Force, the Wolfsburg Principle Group, and the Joint Monetary and Money Laundering Steering Groups have all drawn their attention to the misuse of international trade finance as one of the ways criminal organizations and terrorist financiers have moved money to disguise the origins and degrade into the legitimate economy. However, the solutions proposed by the international organization do not stimulate economic growth, job creation, or international trade and finance. Take the case of sanctions and embargoes and boycotts. They are used for political agendas and purposes and have little to do with economies and international trade. Sanctions are double-edged sword. Take the example of sanctions imposed by the US, the UN, the EU, and the other organizations. Why international trade and its economic agents are suffering from contraction of international trade volumes, recessions, lower annual economic growth rates, and a time when the cost of money is historically very low and the cost of energy has fallen more than 60%. These two factors should have stimulated economic growth worldwide as well as international trade, because investors' expectations are at lowest ebb. Sanctions have distorted international relations between exporting and importing countries without providing alternative avenues for solutions. The following data represent the opinion of 783 participants to the GTR annual summit in September 2014 in Singapore. The audience included bankers, corporates and traders, insurers, risk analysts, ACAs, and multinational lawyers, solution providers, etc. The audience was polled on their opinion throughout the conference. Here are some of the results. What are the single biggest issue facing your business? If you see legal and regulatory environment, 64%. What is the most critical barrier you see within project finance at present? Host government, regulatory, and legal environment. I leave to you to conclude from the above opinion poll the role of governments in business and the economy. In retrospect, the role of ICC Financial Crime Risk and Policy Group, of which I am a member in Paris, proposes to rethink the future of trade finance, encourage governments, regulatory bodies, and the G20 leaders to remove or alleviate the obstacles to trade finance while stimulating economic growth. I remember one phrase from the Conference on International Banking organized by the Financial Times in London in 1982, where the keynote speaker, the Right Honorable the Lord Chalfont, officer of the British Empire, Master of Ceremonies, he stated, "Too many laws stiff the international banking system and finance." I think we have arrived to that situation now. Thank you for your patience and listening.